Opioids. That is a word that has only become sort of a household word in recent years as people realize that what's in your medicine cabinet can be accessed by your loved ones and become a serious problem. Today, we are with Chief Jason Stachey, as well as Chris Hayes, who is the coordinator for the Drug Task Force. They're both members of the Hot Springs Police Department, and we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about a problem that is obviously becoming of great concern across the country, but let's focus on Garland County and Hot Springs. Is this becoming a problem for us?
It is, Terry. You know, our country, state, and city are in the middle of a opioid crisis at this time. It is a very serious public health and public safety problem. You know, there's data that's been recently published that now opioid, or I should say drug overdoses in general, are among the leading cause of death for Americans under the age of 50 years old. So it's very, very alarming what drugs in general, but specifically opioid addiction is doing to our society.
Chris, I think there's still some confusion out there as to what opioids are, and we have some actual examples before us on this table. Can you give us a definition and kind of go through what these various items that are before us?
Sure, absolutely. And there are, as with any prescription medication, there are so many variants of it, and we just have some examples of the main ones up here today, being oxycodone in two different variants. One's a 15 milligram, and then hydrocodone, which can be given in probably 5 or 6 different milligrams of dosage units. So these all affect pain response in the body, so it eliminates pain. And the potential for abuse because of how they eliminate pain is great. And that's what gets us into a lot of these cycles. Those that are prescribed these medications legitimately with a legitimate issue that they need that specific drug, over time can start abusing these actual drugs.
So these are everyday things that get prescribed for a variety of conditions?
Absolutely, yes.
I see. So with these being commonly found in most people's homes, how do you address investigations that involve these drugs?
Well, first and foremost, you know, we get information from the public on who and what they're selling as far as the illicit drugs. And if someone's selling their own prescriptions, then we take that seriously and we try to act on that as quickly as we can. That it's all about money in the drug trade, and there's no exception with the opioid-based or any other drug out there. It's all about making money, and if somebody has a prescription, a lot of times we see that abused, where they're selling their prescription to make a little extra cash.
Are the young people in our community especially vulnerable to this? They
are, and you'd mentioned earlier, you know, we have medication in our medicine cabinet at home, and that's where things start. The young folks, where they get access to this type of medication, is at home. I had a knee surgery many years ago, and I noticed after about 6 years I still had a bottle of hydrocodone that I was prescribed in my medicine cabinet, and there's no need for it to be there. It's not valid anymore. I'm not going to utilize it. So we and the Sheriff's Department both actively push the prescription drug take-back program, so at least we're eliminating that in the average person's home so the kids don't have access to it.
Very good. Chief Stachey, what are you doing specifically now with your officers to be prepared when they encounter people with opioid problems and they say perhaps exhibited signs of an overdose? How are you preparing for that?
Well, one of the things that we just recently completed, a matter of fact last week, is all sworn officers at our department are now fully certified to administer Narcan. Narcan is essentially a nasal spray that is administered in a person's nasal passage to temporarily reduce the effects of an opioid overdose. So it's to this day, since the Narcan program has started in Arkansas, they have attributed 62 saves in our state since its implementation.
That is amazing. So it only temporarily allows the individual to regain consciousness?
Right. You know, it allows the person to come out of their stupor. A lot of the symptoms that you see with opioid overdoses is a very slowed respiratory, very slow pulse. So really it kind of revives the person. Obviously they still need medical care. You know, once the first responder administers the Narcan to the individual, but the effects of it are temporarily reduced so they can get to a healthcare facility and get the treatment they need.
So often the officer is helping to make that happen as well.
A lot quicker, absolutely.
But you're in the business of saving lives? Is that what this is all about? We
are, and you know, we want to be, you know, obviously this is a societal health issue, and you know, law enforcement, we want to do our part in protecting our community, and it is a program that is very important to us, and we want to make sure that, you know, we can help save the life of a citizen who may be in distress if they did take a little bit too much of the opioid product, whether that's heroin or a prescription.
Because these, as Chris was mentioning earlier, we were talking about the fact that they can be gateways to even bigger problems in the drug world.
Absolutely, and heroin is what we'll call the next step if they transition to an illicit drug, and heroin is usually it. The heroin trade in Hot Springs, it's been minimal over the years, but we have definitely had those groups that typically from either the Northeast United States or Southern Texas regions, depending on what their sale is. What the example up here is, I believe, a black tar heroin, and that's typically from our southern borders. Just to put things in perspective, this is all about money for the drug dealers. Heroin, when it first came here, the first case I worked on it, there were about a good network of 10 to 15 people associated with it. We were able to stamp that out pretty quickly, but it was $350 a gram street value for heroin, as opposed to meth or cocaine, which was $100 a gram. So these individuals, like I say, it's about money. They can travel to whichever destination they want in the United States and pick up their heroin and come back and make a lot more money with it. So once we establish a network of heroin specifically, we really try to focus on that quickly and eliminate that as fast as possible, because it definitely causes some issues.
Well, we appreciate your efforts in trying to limit that. So apparently there are a number of ways that we can eliminate or greatly reduce the amount of opioids out there, Chief. Can you tell us some ways that people can get rid of them quickly?
Absolutely. 3 years ago, we initiated a drug take-back box in the lobby of our police department. And so anyone, citizen, any resident of the city of Hot Springs or Garland County can stop by the police department Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and dispose of any unused medication. And it doesn't have to necessarily be painkillers or opioid-based products. It can be any unused medication that you would find in a person's medicine cabinet at home.
And people often call about the drug take-back days. You have special days for that too?
There's certain days set aside throughout the year that all law enforcement agencies can participate in. It's really just kind of a highlight just to emphasize that, you know, law enforcement has this tool.
So throughout Hot Springs and Garland County, obviously a great number of drugs are captured and gotten off the street that day, in that people bring them in, but you can do this any day of the week.
Yes,
any
ma'am.
time that the police department is open, you can bring by those medications, perhaps from someone who has passed away, or for whatever reason no longer needs that stash of drugs.
Sure.
We all, as you say, forget about expired medicines as well.
And to go one step further, I know, because we in the past, the drug task force obviously and the police department, if those that can't get out or can't access the police department for whatever reason, call us and let us know what you have, and we can come take those items and we'll dispose of them here at the police department.
Yes, and finally, sometimes the problems that are caused by legally prescribed drugs do not hit home until it hits a loved one, a family member or a friend. And Jason, I know that that is something that you take personally now. I do. I think most of us do, that we know of someone personally who we've lost because of this problem.
It definitely can affect everybody, including myself. Approximately 2 weeks ago, I had a very close family member take his own life. He had been suffering from opioid addiction for multiple years and had finally come to the conclusion that he could not take it any longer. And so, you know, it affects everybody. It just, in one way or another, whether it's you know, through unfortunately suicide, but it also affects families and it affects children, you know, whose parents may be addicted. So, you know, this is an issue that, you know, law enforcement cannot claim victory by themselves. We can't triumph by ourselves. It takes all of us as a society to address this issue.
Yes, and if we see someone who might be exhibiting the early signs of drug addiction, it is time to speak up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Stop what you're doing. Set the person down. Communication's the biggest thing that you can do to help the person and find them help, get them help. You know, it does fall back. You know, the person you know, needs to want to help themselves. You can only do so much, but encourage that person. Be there for them. Should you know you see that they're having a problem.
Fortunately, in our community, we have a number of agencies and helps out there for people who have drug addiction. We've got rehab centers, we have counseling, we have the court system, all who have various mechanisms in place to help those out of drug addiction. So we're blessed with that. But unless someone does speak up or recognize the problem, then sometimes it's too late for individuals, and we don't want to lose anyone in our on our city.
That's exactly right, and that's why you know, the Hot Springs Police Department, as well as the Sheriff's Department, State Police, we understand the magnitude of this problem, and we're going to put out every effort we can to make sure that no other families lose a loved one.
We also want to commend you for the large operations that you have had that have resulted in getting drug dealers off the streets.
Yes, ma'am, and we will continue to focus those efforts specifically in the next few months.
Very good. As you can tell, the Hot Springs Police Department is working hard behind the scenes as well as just out front in the community to address drug addiction and specifically to address the problem of opioids. We don't want that to be the #1 problem in our community.
No, ma'am, we do not.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing with the community a little bit about opioids in case you're not familiar with it. And as Chris said, if you, for any reason, need help in disposing your medications or have any questions, you can call the non-emergency number for the police department, which is 321-6789. Thank you again, gentlemen.
Thank you, Terry.
And next week we'll bring you more city news.